The Mockery Council. The massive space station Harmony Point rotated slowly against the backdrop of distant stars, its gleaming surface reflecting the light of 3 suns. Once every standard year, this marvel of engineering hosted the Galactic Trade Summit, where representatives from 150 different species gathered to negotiate commerce agreements, settle disputes, and maintain the delicate balance of interstellar civilization. Today marked a historic first. For the first time in the summit's 3-century history, representatives from Earth would attend. The newest species to achieve faster-than-light travel had finally requested membership in the galactic community, and their arrival was eagerly anticipated by species curious to meet these newcomers called humans. In the station's central observation deck, Ambassador Crixtal of the Zephyrian Empire adjusted his ceremonial robes and gazed out at the assembled fleet. Hundreds of vessels from across the galaxy floated in perfect formation around Harmony Point. Each ship represented the pinnacle of its species' engineering prowess. The crystalline vessels of the luminary caught starlight and split it into rainbow cascades. The organic bioships of the Verdani pulsed with living energy. The geometric perfection of synthetic collective cubes demonstrated mathematical precision in every angle. "Have you seen the human vessel yet?" asked Ambassador Theiss, her serpentine form coiling elegantly as she joined Crixtal at the observation window. Her species, the Nagari, had been among the first to achieve space travel and took pride in their ancient diplomatic traditions. Crixtal's feathers ruffled with amusement. "Indeed I have. It's quite remarkable." Through the viewing port, they could see a vessel that stood out dramatically from the elegant fleet surrounding it. The human ship looked more like a flying industrial complex than a diplomatic transport. Its hull was a patchwork of different metals, clearly built from salvaged materials and repurposed components. Cargo containers and mining equipment were bolted to its exterior, and several sections showed the rough welds and practical modifications common to working spacecraft rather than ceremonial vessels. "Is that truly their diplomatic ship?" Theiss asked, her scaled brow ridge rising in what her species considered polite skepticism. "It appears to be a converted mining vessel. According to our intelligence reports, humans call it the Persistence," Crixtal replied, his translator rendering his musical language into standard galactic speech. "It seems they've sent miners and cargo haulers to represent their entire species." Word of humanity's unusual choice of diplomatic transport had spread quickly through the station. In the elegant corridors where ambassadors from advanced civilizations discussed matters of interstellar importance, the human vessel became a source of considerable amusement. The ethereal collective, beings of pure energy who had transcended physical form eons ago, found the crude matter-based construction quaint. The hive mothers of Cygnus Prime, who commanded fleets of ships grown rather than built, giggled at the primitive metalworking evident in every welded seam. In the station's central assembly hall, delegates had gathered for the opening ceremony. The chamber itself was a masterpiece of architectural cooperation, designed to accommodate the diverse physical needs of dozens of species. Atmosphere zones maintained different gas mixtures. Gravity fields varied to accommodate everything from the massive boulder people to the delicate crystal singers, and translation matrices ensured that every word spoken could be understood by all present. Council Chairman Vextar, an ancient being whose species had helped establish the first interstellar trade agreements, called the session to order with traditional words of welcome. His form was humanoid but tall and elegant, with skin that shifted between silver and gold depending on his mood. Around him, the assembled representatives of galactic civilization settled into their designated areas, each species grouped according to their environmental needs and diplomatic protocols. "Today we welcome a new voice to our ancient chorus," Vextar announced, his words carrying the weight of ceremony and tradition. "The species known as humanity has requested membership in our trading federation. Let us extend to them the courtesy and respect due to all civilized beings." The great doors at the back of the chamber opened with a soft hiss of equalizing atmosphere, and the human delegation entered. The sight that greeted them would have been overwhelming to most species making first contact with galactic civilization. Beings of impossible variety filled the enormous space. Some floated in specialized atmosphere bubbles, others moved on limbs numbering anywhere from 2 to 12, and several existed as patterns of organized energy that barely qualified as individual entities. But the 3 humans who walked calmly down the central aisle seemed remarkably composed for representatives of such a young species. Leading the delegation was Ambassador Sarah Martinez, a middle-aged woman whose practical gray uniform looked severely out of place among the elaborate ceremonial garments worn by other delegates. Her two companions, introduced as trade specialist Kim Chen and security attaché Marcus Webb, wore similarly simple clothing that suggested function over form. As they approached the speaking platform, whispers and the alien equivalents of laughter rippled through the assembled delegates. The humans looked so ordinary, so unremarkable compared to the exotic beings surrounding them. Their technology appeared primitive, their dress sense non-existent, and their ship suggested they had literally just finished hauling cargo before arriving at the most important diplomatic gathering in the galaxy. Ambassador Martinez stepped up to the speaking platform with calm confidence, seemingly unaware of or unconcerned by the amused reactions her delegation was generating. When she began to speak, her voice carried clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems, automatically translated into the dozens of languages represented in the audience. Honored representatives of galactic civilization, she began, Earth extends its greetings to all your worlds and peoples. We come here today seeking partnership, trade, and the opportunity to contribute to the prosperity that you have built together. The response was polite but hardly enthusiastic. Several delegates exchanged glances that clearly communicated their doubt about what a species of crude miners and cargo haulers could possibly contribute to advanced galactic civilization. Chairman Vextar maintained diplomatic protocol as he responded to the human greeting. Ambassador Martinez, the Galactic Trade Federation welcomes Earth's interest in joining our community. However, as you may be aware, membership requires demonstration of both technological capability and cultural compatibility. We must ensure that new members can contribute meaningfully to interstellar commerce and maintain the standards of civilized interaction that have served us well for centuries. Martinez nodded thoughtfully. Of course, Chairman. We understand that trust must be earned, especially when dealing with species that have millennia of experience while Earth has barely begun to explore beyond our home system. Her humble response generated more quiet amusement from the assembled delegates. The idea that humans might have anything to offer civilizations that had been traveling between stars since before human ancestors had discovered fire seemed almost charmingly naive. Ambassador Theiss leaned toward her neighbor, a floating gas being from the nebular territories, and whispered just loudly enough to be overheard. How delightfully primitive. They actually seem to believe they belong here. The comment sparked a ripple of similar observations throughout the chamber. Delegates began making increasingly pointed remarks about human appearance, technology, and apparent lack of sophistication. The crystal singers produced harmonious tones that their neighbors recognized as their species' equivalent of condescending laughter. The machine collective's representatives processed the situation through logical matrices that concluded human participation would add no value to galactic commerce. But Ambassador Martinez continued to listen with the same calm patience she had shown since entering the chamber. Her two companions remained equally composed, showing no signs of embarrassment or anger despite the increasingly open mockery they were facing. Chairman Vextar raised a hand for attention, though whether to restore dignity to the proceedings or to formalize what was becoming an obvious conclusion was unclear. Ambassador Martinez, while the Federation appreciates Earth's interest, we must ask what your species can offer that would justify full membership status. Our preliminary observations suggest that human technology is several centuries behind our standard industrial capabilities. Your fastest ships are slower than our courier vessels. Your manufacturing processes appear to be based on primitive metalworking and chemical reactions. Even your diplomatic transport suggests a civilization more suited to cargo handling than interstellar negotiation. The chamber fell quiet as delegates waited for the human response to this polite but devastating assessment. Several species had recording equipment active, expecting to capture humanity's embarrassed withdrawal from consideration for membership. Martinez took a moment to look around the chamber, making eye contact with as many delegates as the diverse range of alien physiology allowed. When she spoke, her voice carried the same steady confidence it had maintained throughout the increasingly uncomfortable ceremony. Chairman Vextar, you raise valid points about human technology and capabilities. We are indeed newer to space travel than most species represented here. Our ships are slower than yours, our manufacturing methods more basic, and our experience with interstellar relations limited to what we've learned by observing your civilizations from a distance. Several delegates nodded approval at this honest assessment of human limitations. However, Martinez continued, We believe that different perspectives and approaches can strengthen any organization. Earth's relatively recent entry into space travel means we approach problems differently than species with millennia of established traditions. Our industrial methods may be primitive, but they're also highly adaptable and efficient with limited resources. And our diplomatic transport, while certainly less elegant than the magnificent vessels surrounding this station, was chosen specifically because it represents who we are and how we work. The explanation generated more amused sounds from the assembled aliens. The idea that choosing an ugly, practical ship somehow represented diplomatic philosophy struck most delegates as either naive or desperately defensive. Ambassador Crickstall, whose species prided itself on elegant spacecraft design, decided to address the humans directly. Ambassador Martinez, surely you cannot expect us to believe that arriving in a converted mining vessel was a deliberate diplomatic choice rather than simply the best ship your species could manage. For the first time since entering the chamber, Martinez smiled, and something in that expression made several nearby delegates pause their quiet conversations. Ambassador Crickstall, I think there may be some misunderstanding about both the ship we arrived in and the nature of human diplomatic philosophy. Perhaps it would help if I explained how we approach problems that seem impossible to solve. She activated a small device on her wrist, speaking quietly into it. Captain Rodriguez, would you please activate external communications? I'd like our host to hear from the Persistence directly. A new voice crackled through the chamber's communication system, speaking in the same practical tone that had characterized all human interactions so far. This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Earth vessel Persistence, Harmony Point Control. We're receiving your transmission clearly. Chairman Vextar looked confused by this development. Ambassador Martinez, while we appreciate meeting your ship's captain, I'm not sure what this accomplishes regarding your membership application. Martinez's smile widened slightly, and for the first time, several delegates began to sense that something about this situation was not quite what it appeared to be. Captain Rodriguez, would you please explain to our hosts what the Persistence actually is? There was a pause before the captain's voice returned, now carrying a subtle tone that several species recognized as barely suppressed amusement. Certainly, Ambassador. Council members, the Persistence is indeed a converted mining vessel, just as your observations indicated. What your scans may not have detected is that it's also the command and control center for Earth's first deep space diplomatic mission. The chamber began to buzz with confused conversations as delegates tried to understand what the human captain meant. Command and Control Center suggested something larger than a single converted mining ship. Captain, Martinez said clearly, I think our hosts are curious about the full scope of our mission. Would you mind explaining what else accompanied us to Harmony Point? Not at all, Ambassador, Rodriguez replied, and now the amusement in her voice was unmistakable. Council members, human diplomatic doctrine suggests that important negotiations should be approached with both hope and preparation. We came here hoping for friendship and partnership, but we also came prepared for less optimistic outcomes. As she spoke, something began to change in the space around Harmony Point. The elegant alien vessels that had been maintaining perfect formation around the station began detecting energy signatures that their sensors couldn't quite identify. Deep harmonic vibrations started resonating through the station's hull, too low for most species to hear, but felt as a subtle pressure in the atmosphere. Chairman Vextar activated his personal scanner, checking readings that suddenly made no sense according to any known technology. What is causing these sensor anomalies? Martinez looked around the chamber once more, and this time her expression carried something that made even the most advanced species present lean forward with sudden attention. Chairman, you asked what humanity can offer to galactic civilization. Perhaps it's time we showed you. The harmonic vibrations grew stronger, and through the chamber's viewing ports, delegates began to see something that would change their understanding of human capabilities forever. The revelation. The deep thrumming sound continued to build, resonating through Harmony Point's massive structure like the heartbeat of some enormous creature. What had started as barely perceptible vibrations now filled the station with harmonics that made conversation difficult and caused several species-sensitive equipment to fluctuate wildly. Ambassador Thias pressed her scaled hands against the nearest viewing port, her serpentine eyes straining to identify the source of the disturbance. What is that sound? Our sensors detect massive energy displacement, but there's nothing visible in the surrounding space. Captain Rodriguez's voice crackled through the station's communication system with professional calm. Council members, what you're experiencing is the approach signature of the Earth vessel Unity. She's still several thousand kilometers out, but her engines generate harmonic resonance that travels ahead of the ship itself. Chairman Vextar's golden skin had shifted to worried silver as he struggled to understand the sensor readings flooding his personal display. Impossible. Our long-range scanners show no approaching vessels. If something that large were moving toward us, we would have detected it hours ago. Your scanners are detecting exactly what they're designed to find, Ambassador Martinez replied, her earlier diplomatic humility replaced by quiet confidence. Energy signatures from conventional faster-than-light drives, standard hull compositions, and communication patterns consistent with known galactic technology. Unfortunately for your sensors, human engineering doesn't always follow conventional approaches. The crystal singers in the audience began producing discordant tones as their harmonic senses detected patterns that violated their understanding of how sound and energy should behave in space. The machine collective's representatives processed millions of calculations per second, trying to reconcile sensor data that contained logical contradictions. Ambassador Krickstall activated his species' most advanced detection equipment, scanners capable of analyzing subspace fluctuations and quantum field variations. The readings he received made him question whether his instruments were malfunctioning. The energy patterns suggest something approximately 15 kilometers in length, but our optical sensors detect nothing. How is this possible? Stealth technology, trade specialist Chen spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the matter-of-fact tone of someone discussing routine engineering. Earth developed adaptive camouflage systems during our early expansion period. When you're exploring unknown regions without knowing what you might encounter, being able to remain undetected becomes a survival necessity. The implications of her casual explanation sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. Stealth technology that could hide something 15 kilometers long from the galaxy's most advanced sensor networks represented a capability that none of the established civilizations possessed. Security Attaché Webb stepped forward, his plain gray uniform somehow seeming less out of place as the nature of the human delegation became clearer. Council members, human diplomatic protocol requires that we be prepared for any eventuality. We came here hoping to join your federation as friends and partners, but we also prepared for the possibility that first contact might not proceed smoothly. The harmonic thrumming reached a crescendo that made the station's hull sing in sympathetic vibration, and then something extraordinary happened. Space around Harmony Point began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. The shimmer effect spread outward in expanding rings, and as it passed, previously invisible objects began to materialize. First came the escort vessels, sleek, predatory shapes that had been maintaining formation around the alien fleet without anyone realizing they were there. Dozens of human ships decloaked simultaneously, their hulls dark and angular, designed for function rather than beauty, but possessing a lethal elegance that made the decorative vessels of other species suddenly seem fragile and impractical. Defensive perimeter established, Captain Rodriguez reported calmly. All human vessels are maintaining peaceful configurations, but we're prepared to respond if the situation deteriorates. Ambassador Martinez watched the shocked faces around the chamber with something that might have been sympathy. Council members, when Earth first detected your communications and began learning about galactic civilization, we faced a difficult decision. We could announce ourselves immediately and hope for a friendly reception, or we could take time to understand what we might be dealing with and prepare accordingly. The viewing ports now revealed the full scope of what humanity had hidden from galactic detection. The escort fleet was impressive enough, but it was merely the advance guard for something much larger. As the stealth fields continued to dissipate, a massive shape began to resolve against the starfield. The Unity was less a ship than a flying city, its hull stretching 15 kilometers from bow to stern and 5 kilometers at its widest point. But even more shocking than its size was its design. Unlike the organic curves favored by most galactic species, or the geometric precision of the synthetic races, the Unity possessed an architecture that was unmistakably functional. Massive manufacturing bays were visible through transparent sections of hull. Rotating habitat rings suggested a population measured in millions. Agricultural domes created patterns of green and brown across its surface, indicating complete ecological self-sufficiency. By the 7 spiral arms, breathed Ambassador Theiss, her translator struggling to render the religious profanity her species used for situations that defied comprehension. It's not just a ship, it's an entire civilization. A mobile civilization, Chen corrected. The Unity is humanity's first deep space colony vessel, designed for long-term exploration and settlement of regions beyond our home system. She carries complete manufacturing facilities, agricultural systems, research laboratories, and living space for 3 million humans, plus all the equipment necessary to establish permanent colonies on suitable worlds. The significance of this revelation began to sink in for the assembled delegates. What they had taken for a primitive species sending miners and cargo haulers to beg for membership in galactic civilization was actually an advanced spacefaring civilization that had been secretly observing and preparing for first contact while developing technologies that surpassed anything in current galactic use. Chairman Vextar struggled to maintain his composure as the implications cascaded through his mind. "How long have you been watching us?" 37 years, Ambassador Martinez replied matter-of-factly. "Since we first detected galactic communications and realized we weren't alone in the universe. We've been studying your languages, your technology, your social structures, and your military capabilities. We learned about the Galactic Trade Federation, its history, its successes, and its methods of dealing with species that didn't conform to established norms." The chamber erupted in panicked conversations as delegates realized that everything they thought they knew about humanity was not just wrong but deliberately deceptive. The primitive miners they had been mocking had actually been conducting sophisticated intelligence operations for nearly 4 decades. Ambassador Krikstal's feathers had flattened against his body in the posture his species adopted when facing mortal danger. "You've been spying on us, learning our weaknesses, studying our defenses, preparing for war." "Preparing for the possibility of war," Webb corrected, his security background evident in his precise language. "Our analysis of galactic history showed that the Federation tends to be persuasive when dealing with species that don't readily accept its authority. We wanted to ensure that if diplomacy failed, humanity would survive the alternative." Captain Rodriguez's voice added context that made several delegates shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Council members, our records show that in the past 2 centuries the Federation has conducted military interventions against 17 different species that refused to accept trade agreements or territorial limitations. Most of those species eventually joined the Federation after demonstrating that resistance was futile. 3 species didn't survive the experience." The brutal honesty of the human assessment silenced the chamber. The Galactic Trade Federation preferred to describe those historical events as necessary peacekeeping operations, but the humans had clearly analyzed them as what they actually were: demonstrations of overwhelming force designed to compel submission. "So you prepared to fight us," Chairman Vextar said quietly. His skin had shifted to the deep silver that his species displayed when facing an existential threat. "We prepared to survive," Martinez corrected. "There's an important difference. We didn't want to fight anyone, but we weren't willing to be exterminated if other species decided our existence was inconvenient." The Unity had moved close enough that its details were clearly visible through the viewing ports. The massive colony ship dwarfed everything else in the vicinity, including Harmony Point itself. More unsettling than its size was its obvious capability. This wasn't just a big ship. It was a mobile industrial civilization capable of independent existence for indefinite periods. The Machine Collective's senior representative, a construct of living metal, and quantum processors spoke for the first time since the humans had arrived. Its voice was precisely modulated electronic tones that carried absolute certainty. "Analysis indicates human technological capabilities exceed our initial assessments by several orders of magnitude. Stealth systems, manufacturing capacity, and strategic planning suggest a civilization at least equal to Federation standards despite recent achievement of faster-than-light travel." Ambassador Theiss coiled nervously as she processed the implications. Equal to Federation standards? They've been spacefaring for less than a century. How is rapid advancement possible? Chen smiled, and for the first time, her expression carried professional pride rather than diplomatic humility. "Ambassador, when your species developed space travel, you had the luxury of time. You could experiment, make mistakes, learn gradually. Humanity developed faster-than-light capability knowing that other spacefaring civilizations already existed. We couldn't afford to spend centuries catching up gradually, so we compressed the learning process." Compressed how? Demanded the representative of the Boulder people, his massive stone form grinding with agitation. By studying you, Webb answered bluntly. Every transmission you sent, every ship that passed through detectable range, every piece of technology we could observe or analyze. Humanity has been learning from galactic civilization for 37 years without anyone realizing we were watching. We identified your best innovations and improved on them. We analyzed your mistakes and avoided them. We studied your strategic doctrines and developed counters for them. The confession sent waves of shock and anger through the assembled delegates. The idea that a supposedly primitive species had been secretly learning from and preparing to fight the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy was deeply disturbing. But Ambassador Martinez wasn't finished with her revelations. Council members, I want to be clear about something important. We didn't come here to threaten you or to demonstrate superior capabilities. We came here hoping to join galactic civilization as equals and partners. The Unity and our escort fleet were always intended as defensive measures, insurance against the possibility that first contact might go badly. She gestured toward the viewing ports where human vessels maintained their positions with obvious discipline and coordination. But since the subject of capabilities has been raised, I think it's important that everyone understands the situation clearly. The ships you see here represent less than 1% of humanity's current space-based assets. The Unity is our first deep space colony vessel, not our only one, and our manufacturing capabilities mean that what you see today is the minimum of what we can deploy, not the maximum. Chairman Vextar felt the weight of his 3 centuries of diplomatic experience crumbling as he tried to process information that changed everything he thought he knew about balance of power in the galaxy. Ambassador Martinez, are you informing us that humanity possesses military capabilities comparable to the entire Federation? I'm informing you that humanity possesses the capability to defend itself effectively against any conceivable threat, Martinez replied. Whether that threat comes from hostile aliens, natural disasters, or civilizations that believe our existence requires their permission. The silence that followed was filled with the continuing harmonic resonance from the Unity's engines and the quiet hum of human vessels maintaining their patient formation around Harmony Point. Outside the viewing ports, the galaxy's balance of power had shifted irrevocably, and everyone present was beginning to understand that the age of unquestioned Federation dominance had just ended. Captain Rodriguez's voice broke the tense silence with an announcement that made several delegates reach for their emergency communication devices. Ambassador Martinez, we're receiving priority transmissions from multiple Federation homeworlds. It appears that our presence here has been detected across a significant portion of local space. Martinez nodded as if she had expected this development. Thank you, Captain. Council members, it seems that news of humanity's arrival is spreading throughout your territories. I imagine there are some very interesting conversations beginning in your capitals right now. The deep thrumming from the Unity's engines began to shift into new harmonic patterns, and through the viewing ports, delegates could see that the massive colony ship was doing something that defied their understanding of how such vessels should operate. Manufacturing bays were opening, construction platforms were extending, and smaller ships were beginning to emerge from what had seemed like an already complete vessel. The most dangerous ship, it seemed, was just beginning to reveal its true capabilities. The dangerous ship. The harmonic resonance from the Unity shifted into new patterns that made Harmony Point's hull sing like a vast musical instrument. Through the viewing ports, delegates watched in fascination and growing alarm as the massive colony ship began an impossible transformation. What had seemed like a completed vessel was revealing itself to be something far more complex and threatening. Manufacturing bays that had been barely visible through transparent hull sections now opened like blooming flowers, each one large enough to construct vessels the size of traditional galactic cruisers. Construction platforms extended from the Unity's hull on massive mechanical arms, reaching out into space to begin assembling new structures from materials that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "What is that ship doing?" Chairman Vextar demanded, his skin now showing the deep silver of severe distress. The readings on his personal scanner made no sense according to any known engineering principles. Ambassador Martinez followed his gaze to the Unity's ongoing transformation with the calm expression of someone watching a familiar process. The Unity is preparing to fulfill her primary function, Chairman. She's getting ready to build a new human colony. Here? Ambassador Theiss hissed, her serpentine form coiling with anxiety. In Federation space? Without permission or negotiation? Actually, here in neutral space administered by the Harmony Point Authority, trade specialist Chen corrected with diplomatic precision. According to galactic law, neutral zones are open to colonization by any spacefaring species willing to maintain the environmental and safety standards required for shared occupation. Security attaché Webb added context that made several delegates reach for their communication devices. Our legal analysis indicates that this region contains 17 uninhabited systems suitable for human colonization, all within the neutral zone boundaries established by the original Harmony Accords. The implications hit the assembled representatives like a physical shock. Humanity hadn't just arrived for trade negotiations. They had come prepared to establish a permanent presence in the heart of galactic civilization, using the Federation's own laws to justify their expansion. Captain Rodriguez's voice provided additional details that increased the growing sense of crisis. Ambassador Martinez, manufacturing platforms are now operational. Estimated time to complete the first permanent habitat modules is 6 hours. Colony ship deployment will be ready for the first wave of settlers in 18 hours. Martinez activated her wrist communicator, speaking clearly enough for everyone in the chamber to hear. Thank you, Captain. Please proceed with Phase 1 deployment, but maintain defensive readiness. We're still in negotiations. Ambassador Crixtal's feathers stood completely on end as he processed what the humans were casually discussing. You're talking about establishing a permanent human presence in the core region of galactic space. This is not colonization. This is invasion. This is survival, Martinez corrected, her diplomatic composure finally showing signs of strain. Ambassador Crixtal, humanity spent 37 years studying galactic civilization before revealing ourselves. We learned about your history, your methods, and your approach to species that don't conform to Federation expectations. We know what happened to the Kepler Collective when they refused trade agreements. We know about the pacification of the Outer Rim territories. We know how this story ends for species that can't defend themselves effectively. Webb stepped forward, his security background evident in his tactical assessment. Council members. Human strategic analysis indicated a 73% probability that first contact would result in demands for submission followed by military intervention if those demands were refused. We prepared accordingly. The chamber erupted in angry voices as delegates finally understood the scope of what humanity had been planning. This wasn't a naive species stumbling into galactic politics. This was a sophisticated civilization that had been preparing for a confrontation they considered inevitable. You planned for war, the Machine Collective representative stated with electronic precision. All diplomatic contact was deception designed to position human forces for optimal strategic advantage. We planned for survival, Martinez said firmly. And yes, we prepared for the possibility that survival might require fighting. But we also prepared for the possibility that galactic civilization might be wise enough to choose cooperation over conquest. Through the viewing ports, the Unity's transformation continued. Smaller vessels, though still enormous by galactic standards, were emerging from construction bays and taking positions around the colony ship. These weren't military escorts but civilian vessels. Habitat modules, agricultural platforms, mining operations, and manufacturing stations. Humanity was building the infrastructure for permanent settlement while negotiations continued. Chairman Vextar struggled to regain control of the deteriorating situation. His 3 centuries of diplomatic experience had never prepared him for dealing with a species that approached first contact as a military operation disguised as diplomacy. Ambassador Martinez, surely you realize that establishing unauthorized colonies will force the Federation to respond with military intervention. Martinez looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes or optical sensors of every delegate present. When she spoke, her voice carried a finality that made several species unconsciously activate their own defensive systems. Chairman, I think there's been a fundamental misunderstanding about what's happening here. You keep talking about Federation authority as if humanity has agreed to submit to your jurisdiction. We haven't. We came here to offer partnership between equals, not to request permission to exist. Captain Rodriguez's voice added weight to the ambassador's words. Council members, our analysis of Federation military capabilities is complete. We've studied your ship designs, weapon systems, strategic doctrines, and historical tactics. Humanity is prepared for any response you might choose to make. The viewing port suddenly filled with new activity as additional human vessels began decloaking throughout the system. What had started as an escort fleet was revealed to be a complete invasion force. Hundreds of ships designed for different aspects of warfare and colonization. Manufacturing vessels, resource extractors, habitat builders, and defensive platforms materialized in perfect formation around multiple locations. But most unsettling of all was the continued emergence of vessels from the Unity itself. The massive colony ships seemed to contain an impossible number of smaller craft, each one specialized for specific aspects of establishing permanent human presence in space. As delegates watched in growing alarm, it became clear that humanity had brought everything necessary to build a complete civilization in galactic space, with or without Federation approval. Ambassador Thias pressed her hands against the viewing port, counting ships until the numbers became meaningless. "How many vessels are you deploying?" "As many as necessary," Webb replied. "The Unity carries complete industrial infrastructure for establishing human colonies in any environment. Manufacturing capacity, agricultural systems, defensive networks, everything required for permanent settlement." Chen activated her own display, showing technical specifications that made several delegates lean forward despite their alarm. The Unity-class colony ships represent humanity's approach to deep space expansion. Each vessel carries population and equipment for approximately 3 million colonists, plus all the industrial capacity needed to achieve complete self-sufficiency within one standard year. "Unity class?" the Boulder People representative rumbled, his massive stone form grinding with stress. "You have more than one of these vessels?" "Humanity has 17 Unity-class colony ships currently operational," Martinez replied matter-of-factly, "with additional vessels under construction. Our expansion plans call for establishing human presence in 47 different regions over the next 50 years. The casual mention of massive expansion plans sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. 17 ships the size of the Unity, each carrying millions of colonists and complete industrial infrastructure, represented a colonization capability that dwarfed anything in galactic history. Chairman Vextar activated emergency protocols, sealing the chamber and establishing direct communication with Federation military command. The scope of humanity's capabilities had transformed what began as a simple trade negotiation into the greatest military crisis in galactic history. "Ambassador Martinez," he said, his voice carrying the authority of a civilization that had dominated galactic politics for millennia, "the Federation cannot permit unauthorized expansion on this scale. You are describing the complete disruption of established territorial boundaries and trade relationships." Martinez's expression showed genuine sadness as she responded. "Chairman, we hoped it wouldn't come to this. Humanity genuinely wanted to join galactic civilization as partners and friends. But we also understood that established powers rarely welcome competition." She gestured toward the viewing ports where human vessels continued their patient deployment. "What you see out there isn't aggression, Chairman. It's preparation for independence. Humanity is claiming the right to exist and expand according to our own values and capabilities, regardless of whether other species approve." Captain Rodriguez's voice carried new urgency as she provided an operational update. "Ambassador, we're detecting massive fleet movements from multiple Federation worlds. Long-range sensors indicate approximately 2,000 vessels moving toward this system from various directions." The announcement confirmed what everyone present had feared but hoped might be avoided. The Federation was mobilizing for war against humanity, and humanity was clearly prepared to respond in kind. But Martinez's next words revealed the true nature of the danger that galactic civilization faced. "Council members, before your military forces arrive, there's something else you need to understand about the Unity and ships like her." She activated a new display showing the colony ship's interior structure in detail. What had seemed like manufacturing and habitat space was revealed to be far more complex and sophisticated. The Unity isn't just a colony ship and manufacturing platform. She's also humanity's most advanced research and development facility. Everything you see being deployed here, the stealth technology, the manufacturing capacity, the defensive systems, represents last-generation human engineering. Webb's security assessment added chilling context. While the Unity has been deploying in this system, her research teams have been analyzing Federation technology and developing countermeasures. Every ship in your fleet, every weapon system, every defensive network, we have working solutions for neutralizing them. The silence that followed was broken only by the continuing harmonic resonance from the Unity's operations and the quiet panic of delegates trying to contact their home worlds. The most advanced civilizations in the galaxy were facing the realization that their technological superiority had been systematically analyzed and countered by a species they had dismissed as primitive miners. Impossible, the Crystal Singers chimed in discordant harmony. Our quantum resonance weapons cannot be countered by crude human technology. Chen smiled with the confidence of someone who had spent years solving exactly these problems. Your quantum resonance systems operate by disrupting molecular bonds through harmonic frequencies. Effective against conventional materials, but human adaptive armor uses programmable matter that shifts its harmonic properties faster than your weapons can adjust. We tested the countermeasures extensively using captured weapon signatures from your own training exercises. The casual mention of intercepted military communications sent new waves of shock through the assembly. Humanity hadn't just been watching galactic civilization. They had been actively penetrating military security and stealing technological secrets for decades. Ambassador Krixtal's scales had shifted to colors his species displayed only when facing extinction. You've been conducting espionage operations against every major civilization simultaneously. This is an act of war. This is an act of survival, Martinez replied. Ambassador, your own military doctrine calls for the complete subjugation of species that refuse Federation authority. We studied those doctrines carefully and prepared accordingly. Through the viewing ports, the scope of human preparation continued to reveal itself. Construction platforms were assembling defensive installations with impossible speed, using manufacturing techniques that combined matter manipulation with automated assembly systems. What would have taken galactic civilization months to build, humanity was completing in hours. More disturbing was the obvious sophistication of their strategic planning. Human vessels weren't randomly positioned but arranged in complex formations that suggested deep understanding of three-dimensional warfare and resource logistics. Every ship served multiple purposes: manufacturing, defense, research, and colonization integrated into a seamless operational framework. Chairman Vextar received a priority communication from Federation Command that made his already pale skin shift to worried silver. Ambassador Martinez, our military analysts estimate that your current deployment represents significant strategic capability. However, the Federation commands the resources of 200 worlds. Surely you cannot believe that any single species can challenge an alliance of that magnitude. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried grim amusement as she responded. Chairman, your analysts are working with incomplete information. What you see here is the advanced deployment of humanity's first colonial fleet. It represents approximately 12% of our current operational capacity. The casual mention of vast additional forces waiting in reserve struck the assembled delegates like a physical blow. If what they could observe represented only 12% of human capabilities, the total scope of humanity's military and industrial power was beyond anything they had imagined possible for such a young civilization. Where are the rest of your forces? Demanded the supreme representative of the Hive Collective, her mental voice projecting urgency through the chamber's translation systems. Distributed throughout human space, Webb replied. Standard defensive doctrine requires maintaining strategic reserves while forward elements secure operational objectives. The 17 Unity-class vessels and their escort fleets are currently positioned to establish human colonies in all major galactic regions simultaneously. The implications were staggering. Humanity wasn't just challenging Federation authority in one system. They were preparing for coordinated expansion across the entire galaxy. Even worse, they possessed the industrial capacity and technological sophistication to make such expansion feasible. Martinez activated her communicator once more, speaking with calm authority that carried throughout the chamber. Captain Rodriguez, please transmit our diplomatic position to all Federation forces approaching this system. Make it clear that humanity seeks peaceful coexistence but is prepared for any alternative. Acknowledged, Ambassador. Transmitting on all standard military frequencies. Earth Colonial Command to approaching Federation forces. Humanity claims territorial rights in neutral space under existing galactic law. We have no hostile intent toward Federation worlds or citizens, but will defend our people and installations against any aggression. We recommend opening diplomatic channels rather than testing our defensive capabilities. The message was professional, reasonable, and absolutely terrifying in its calm confidence. Humanity was politely informing the galaxy's most powerful military alliance that they were prepared for total war while hoping it wouldn't be necessary. But the Unity's most shocking revelation was yet to come. As delegates watched through the viewing ports, the massive colony ship began to reconfigure once again. What had seemed like the completion of her manufacturing deployment was actually preparation for something far more significant. Ambassador Martinez, Chairman Vextar said with the desperation of someone watching his civilization's foundations crumble, "What is your vessel doing now?" Martinez looked out at the Unity with something that might have been pride or sadness. "Chairman, I told you that the Unity was humanity's first deep space colony ship. What I didn't mention is that she's also our proof of concept for the most dangerous capability our species has developed." New structures were emerging from the Unity's hull, but these weren't manufacturing platforms or habitat modules. They were massive cylindrical forms that extended into space like the roots of some enormous tree. As they reached full extension, their purpose became horrifyingly clear to anyone familiar with terraforming technology. "Genesis pods," breathed Ambassador Theiss, her voice carrying the terror her species reserved for natural disasters. "You're carrying Genesis pods." 17,000 Genesis pods, Chen confirmed, each one containing complete ecological systems capable of terraforming dead worlds into human habitable environments within 10 standard years. The Unity can literally create new Earths wherever we choose to deploy her. The revelation struck the assembled delegates with existential horror. Genesis technology, the ability to transform lifeless planets into garden worlds, was theoretical for most galactic civilizations. The few species that possessed primitive versions of the capability required centuries to achieve results that humanity could apparently accomplish in a decade. But the true danger wasn't the technology itself. It was what it represented. A species that could create habitable worlds at will possessed unlimited expansion potential. Population pressure, resource limitations, territorial boundaries, all the factors that kept galactic civilizations in careful balance became irrelevant when new worlds could be manufactured to order. "Now do you understand why we prepared so carefully for this meeting?" Martinez asked quietly. "Humanity doesn't need permission to expand, Chairman. We don't need to negotiate for territory or resources. We can create both whenever and wherever we choose. The question is whether we do that as members of galactic civilization or as an independent force that renders your entire political structure obsolete." Chairman Vextar stared out at the Unity's Genesis pods with the expression of someone watching his species' future disappear. The Federation's power had always been based on controlling access to habitable worlds and critical resources. A civilization that could manufacture both at will would make the existing galactic order irrelevant within a few generations. "What do you want from us?" he asked finally, his voice carrying the defeat of someone who had run out of options. Martinez's diplomatic composure returned, but now it carried the weight of demonstrated capability. "The same thing we wanted when this meeting began, Chairman. Recognition as equals, fair treatment in trade and territorial disputes, and the right to expand and develop according to our own values without submitting to outside authority." She gestured toward the viewing ports where human vessels continued their patient operations. "The difference is that now you understand what equality means when dealing with humanity. We're not asking to be your subjects or your enemies. We're offering to be your partners, but partnership requires mutual respect." Captain Rodriguez's voice provided a final operational update that summarized the new reality. "Ambassador, all systems are now operational. The first permanent human colony in galactic space is ready to receive settlers. Genesis pods are standing by for deployment to 17 candidate worlds. Colonial defense networks are active and ready to respond to any threats." Martinez looked around the chamber one final time, making eye contact with every delegate present. "Council members, humanity has revealed our capabilities because we believe honesty is the foundation of lasting relationships. We came here hoping to find friends and allies. Whether we succeeded depends on your response to what you've learned today." The deep thrumming from the Unity's engines shifted into new harmonics, and through the viewing ports, delegates could see that the massive colony ship was preparing for her next phase of operations. The most dangerous ship in galactic history wasn't dangerous because of its weapons or defenses. It was dangerous because it represented hope, growth, and the unstoppable expansion of a species that refused to accept limitations imposed by others. And there were 16 more ships just like it, waiting for humanity's next move in the great game of galactic civilization. The choice, as Ambassador Martinez had said, belonged to the galaxy, but the consequences would belong to everyone.